Hello and welcome to the very first basketball edition of Buckeye Blueprint. I'm here with Nick and Jacob, just as normal. All right, so this has been a very turbulent season for Ohio State basketball. You just want, since we haven't done this before, you just want to give a quick recap about what has gone on?
Yeah, I mean, the way going into Big Ten play, they lost a game against Florida Atlantic that obviously they shouldn't, but, you know, they've had some decent performances, and then they start Big Ten play, and it's just gone absolute downhill from there. 0-4 to start the Big Ten. Then they won 3 of their next 4, lost a game by 1 point to Purdue, and then 2 points to Northwestern at home. So they beat a Michigan State and Minnesota team, 2 decent wins. Then they just completely laid an egg against Iowa when you had 9 teams in the Big Ten at either 4-4 or 3-5. OSU was one of those teams at 3-5. Now they're at 3-7, and I mean, frankly, it's like they don't have any words of where to go from here.
So what has been at the center of their inconsistency that has plagued them all year?
Well, you know, for me, one of the overarching things is no togetherness. You know, Cam Williams and Trevor Thompson both talked about that. You know, it's like, oh, we need to start playing as a unit. We need to stop playing for each other. Well, where is that? I have yet to see it. They never have any like decent assist numbers. Assist to turnover ratio, it seems, is always way out of whack. And not only that, you know, I know you've mentioned this many times, they don't have a go-to scorer at all. There's not one guy they can just hand the ball to and you go, you know what, go out there and lead us. Trevor Thompson, you could kind of make the argument for that because he's having a very good season, something that I don't think I really expected very much. But everyone was looking for Jaquan Lyle to be that guy, and he's been wildly inconsistent. Cam Williams, you know, he'll have moments where he looks really, really good. You know, he kind of looks like he's finally coming together. And then his inconsistencies from three-point range come right back. So overall, for me, this team doesn't have a true leader yet. You know, Cam Williams may have stood up in the locker room and tried to be that kind of guy, but I just don't think he has it in him for that.
Yeah, like you said, there are a myriad of things that have gone wrong, not just this year, but the last few years for Ohio State basketball. The trend just continues downward. But you know, the last game is very evident. Like you said, Trevor Thompson, you can make an argument, but he's not going to be the one bringing the ball up the court. And you have to have a guy with the ball in his hands, able to make a shot in desperation if he can. OSU was down by 1 point at 4 different times against Maryland, just couldn't get over the hump, which kind of symbolized really the whole season. They haven't been able to do that. Melo Trimble, who's been Maryland's go-to guy, came on his freshman year. You can make the argument he was their go-to guy, and definitely the last 2 years. He got the ball, buried a 3, and that put the game at 2 possessions, and OSU couldn't come back from that. And Mark Turgeon said on the sideline, Maryland's head coach just said, you know, I looked at Melo and said, you know, take over, and told everyone to get out of his way. OSU simply just doesn't have a guy like that. And to win in college basketball, especially in the one-and-done era, you absolutely need someone like that.
And it's not just like Melo Trimble. That's like every Big Ten team that Ohio State's faced so far. I mean, every week when we're kind of like running down through like the teams that they're going to face and we're looking at that one guy who's going to be the key for them, we always can pick out a name. You and I always can figure it out. Ohio State, I can't pick it out week from week. I mean, most of the time I'm just going to assume it's going to be Trevor Thompson at this point, but centers don't normally dominate the game in that kind of regard.
Yeah. So you guys both mentioned that Trevor Thompson has had a much better year this year and relatively unexpected, but behind them, they do lack depth.
Yeah, Trevor Thompson, like every player on this team, hasn't been the most consistent, but he's put together, I believe, 7 double-doubles at this point, and he's had 3 games of 15-plus rebounds. So he's certainly done his part and is easily the most improved player on this team. But behind him, Micah Potter has very much showed that he's a freshman. It's like he runs around with cement on his feet on defense. And the last few games, it's definitely showed guards can get to the lane when they beat their man, and the big men can't rotate over. And then David Bell behind him, he's always just been a guy to come in when Potter or Thompson get into foul trouble. So that's definitely a part OSU is lacking.
So, you know, you said Potter on defense with his feet. I mean, maybe it is because they don't want to have to turn to Dave Bell if both of them get into foul trouble. But Micah Potter, when he plays defense underneath the hoop, I understand you're a pretty tall guy, but you're 6'9". For a center, that's not exactly towering over everyone. And when he just puts his arms up and just gets shoved back by the opposing center or even forward who's coming in, And that defense might work every now and then to get in the opposing player's head, but that's just not going to stand here. We see Thompson get up off of his feet. We see him try to challenge shots. I don't get that out of Potter. Dave Bell might do that, but then you don't really have much of an offensive presence. Right now, Potter's only real dynamic that he brings is the possibility of a three-point ball, but even that's just not always
he's much
there.
more of a stretch forward than he is a 5.
Exactly.
So Ohio State's been sliding right now, and their next game, they're heading to Michigan. It doesn't get any easier for them. So what do you see? Do you see that they have any chance of winning, or are they're going to lose to that team up north once again?
I mean, if anything we've learned this year, OSU is impossible to predict unless they're on the road when they seemingly always get down by double digits in the first half. Like, I think to the Iowa game, and we mentioned the inconsistency, I thought Trevor Thompson was going to have a huge game. He had 0.6 rebounds and 5 fouls. He fouled out with 4 minutes to go in the game. And that was without the Big Ten leading scorer, Peter Jock, for Iowa. I mean, that just seemed like a game OSU had to have. And they laid an absolute egg, their worst game of the year. I mean, why should we think it's going to be any difference against Michigan? They're a team that likes to shoot the 3 ball, and they definitely did last year. I expect the same thing, is that OSU gets down early in the first half and kind of scratches and claws its way back, but ends up losing.
The scariest thing, I think, for Ohio State going up to Michigan is going to be, we've talked about this also all year, that they have a terrible time getting off-the-ball screens, and that always leaves a wide-open guy from a little bit deeper range, and that's going to be a nightmare for Ohio State against Michigan, I really think. And, with Jock out last game, we were kind of thinking that Ohio State might be able to kind of clamp down on everyone else, but there's always someone who just seems to step up for the opposing team for Ohio State. And whether that's them playing poor defense or that person just having an uncharacteristically good game, against Michigan, you might have both. You might have one guy who just steps up and takes the role even if he's not necessarily like a star player. And you might also have another guy who just has a great game for no reason. So this is going to be a very, very interesting
You might say
game.
the outlook is not optimistic.
I wouldn't say so.
All right, thank you guys both for joining us for the second half of the show. We're going to talk a little bit about Ohio State's women's basketball team, a little bit more uplifting. They're a little bit better. I'm going to bring on Mackenzie Janak, and we're going to discuss. Welcome back, and I'm now joined by Mackenzie Janak. She is the women's basketball beat reporter for The Lantern. We're going to talk a little Ohio State women's basketball. They are a lot better than Ohio State's men's basketball team, which that last segment was a little pessimistic. But Ohio State's women's team, they're 20-5. They're on a 6-game win streak. They've won 10 of their last 11 games. What has allowed them to improve? Because they do have 5 losses on this season, and they have played some really top teams. They struggled earlier this year. What has allowed them to succeed?
I think recently they've improved just keeping up the consistency, keeping up with coming out with enough energy. I know when they came off against that loss versus Michigan State, they had trouble finding their shots, and they were not able to play good defense. And even the next 2 games versus Purdue and Wisconsin, they, each quarter varied from, good to bad. And so recently they've been able to keep up that consistency each quarter, especially at a halftime. They come out of halftime and do an excellent third quarter. So I just think recently they've been able to keep that up throughout the whole game.
And when I watch them at least, it's not like they're lackadaisical out there. They just seem like they have a lot of fun. And I feel like sometimes the teams that they've played recently, they honestly have not all been that good. And Ohio State is super talented, even from top to bottom. They go really deep. And I think that might be some of their struggles is they're trying to fit a lot of people in. But when I look at them, I agree with you. I think that they have played with more consistency. And they did make a lot of mistakes in yesterday's game. They had 18 turnovers, which is not awesome. But that didn't seem to faze them at all. At the top is Kelsey Mitchell, and everything seems to run through her. Lately, though, it seems like maybe she's taken a bit of a step back and become more of a facilitator. Do you agree with that?
Definitely. I think recently you've seen her get low 20-point games, and
which for a lot of people is really great, but for her it's a little
but
bit
for her, yeah,
mediocre.
it's below her average, but with that she's been able to make up an assist. So the past few games she's been leading the team in assists, and Recently, you can see how that's worked out for them. They've been able to, they've scored the last 4 games 87 or more points. So, dishing that ball out, they've talked about that a lot, getting that extra pass.
Yeah.
So with that, they've just been able to distribute it better and overall be more consistent offensively between, from top to bottom.
I wonder whether this is a trend that's going to continue when they play better teams, when they play ranked teams. Is right now they haven't played a ranked team since they lost to Connecticut on the 19th of December. We're in February now. That seems like a long time ago, and it is a long time ago. The next ranked team they play isn't until Maryland, which they play on the 20th. Until then, we have seen a lot of different players, but I know you mentioned that you think that Stephanie Mavung is someone that doesn't get a lot of attention. She came and she transferred. She sat out last season. She came from North Carolina, and this season she's averaging a double-double.
Yeah, so last night she had her 10th double-double, and I think she definitely does not get enough credit. She's a huge influence down in the paint. She gets easily over 10 rebounds each game. And a lot of times she's even talked about with the rebounds comes the points because she's right there. She gets lots of second chance points. She's just a huge threat to other teams' post. And so on top of Kelsey Mitchell, you have to look down in your post play and, worry about guarding her down there.
Before the season, I thought that she might be a little bit more of a scorer because she did average 17 points in her freshman season at North Carolina. But it seems like it's taken a little bit of time to get her involved in the offense because Ohio State's a team that gets up and down. Whenever the other team scores, Kelsey Mitchell is past half court and literally about 2 seconds after the ball goes through the hoop. It's sort of incredible. I wonder whether as time goes on they're gonna mold better as a team because even they're so young right now that they only have one senior. You look, maybe in this tournament, they're going to make some noise that you expected them to make last year. But I'm thinking even next year, they're so good, especially they have a great freshman class, and they brought Jensen Coretti, Tori McCoy, who's a McDonald's All-American, and Kiara Lewis, who I think a lot of people might have overlooked at the beginning of the season. She looks so young. She has braces. She's not someone who you would think is going to be a force on the court, but she is an absolute terror to the other team. She's a freshman out of Chicago. What have you seen from her that you like?
I just like how she's a team player. And so maybe when you look at the stat sheet, she's not sticking out, but if you actually watch her, she's amazing on defense, is able to disrupt them whenever they go to that full court press. She's always been, a problem for other teams. She disrupts them with the steals, and then she's really good at driving the ball, penetrating to the basket. And she's really good at ball movement too, making that extra pass, getting assists, looking for those players that are open. And so as a freshman, it's very promising to, see what she's going to come up with.
And those rare times that Kelsey Mitchell sits, she seems to take the lead, and she is not afraid at all, which I find it amazing when you're as short and as small as she is. So Lene Harper is also someone who I do want to mention really quickly. She's also another guard, another transfer who has played really well. And she's another person who, on another team, she played at Kentucky. I think had a bit of a bigger role, and she has had to take a bit of a smaller role at Ohio State. But really quickly, I want to touch on. They play 3 games. They play at Wisconsin, Iowa, and then at Nebraska. Do you like I see them just dominating these 3, not having any worry?
Oh, of course. I think they're going to keep up the trend, keep up the high energy, continue to be consistent because they have Maryland coming up, and so they can't really, avoid any missteps here. They have to be on top of their game, and so I think they're going to try to roll into Maryland, coming off of hopefully 9 straight wins, and look to take on the number right now 3 team in the nation.
Yeah, to me, I just want to see if they can keep it up because right now they're playing as well as I think that I've seen them play this season. And the thing that I've wondered about them is whether they can beat these ranked teams. Is it seems like they dominated against the Penn States of the world, as we saw. They came out of the first quarter and it looked like they were playing a different game. They shot the lights out. Sierra Calhoun, who we haven't mentioned, she had a great game. She seems like she's coming on. I want to see if they can keep this up. I want to see if Kelsey Mitchell can continue to facilitate like she has. And maybe they can win in Maryland because, they did win against Maryland twice last year, but they need that big win this year going into Big Ten and NCAA tournament play. Do you agree?
Of course, and I think in order to win at Maryland, they're going to need to be contributing from all their players. So, continue to have Kelsey Mitchell lead and assist while still scoring, over 20 points, and then she'll get 2 other or 3 other players who also are able to score in the double figures. And I think that's where we'll see them be at their best, and that's where they're going to be the biggest threat to the NCAA.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see because that game I'm really looking forward to. It seems like it's a while away because they have a bit of a long stretch here where not much is happening. But thank you a lot, Mackenzie, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, we'll see you next week.